What is up? What is up? What is up? Welcome to another episode of the Hit It to Hoover Baseball Podcast hosted by Jake Nichols and myself, Mitch Davis. Jake, you and I just got back from Hoover. We'll talk about that in the second hour of the podcast. But now we are joined by a man that has probably one of the greatest college baseball Twitters like ever and one of the coolest websites, Noah Darling from CWS247. Noah, welcome to the Hit It to Hoover podcast. How are you doing? Are you ready for some baseball?
I'm great. Best time of the year. Really excited to be here. Can't wait for the postseason. I was a little bit worried when that bracket was first coming out on Monday that it might be a little bit of a down tournament, a lot of favorable matchups early on, but then it just ramped up. I'm so excited for some of these great matchups that I'm sure we'll get into.
Noah, I'm going to turn it over to Jake here in just a second, but I want to just start the show off with your bold take that you had when the brackets were revealed. I've got to call you out on the Ole Miss to make it to Omaha. Why?
Well, ever since Ole Miss played Mississippi State in Pearl, where we saw them kind of get manhandled at home by Mississippi State, and then they beat them in Pearl, I kind of put out there, Ole Miss is going to be playing in a super regional. Now, I'm not an Ole Miss guy. In fact, I've been accused of being a Mississippi State guy for a very long time. But when I put something out there, I want to be right very badly. So when Ole Miss goes out there and they kind of look very bad, I kind of take that risk. I have to support them the rest of the way. So when I say, they're going to make the tournament, that was a gamble. That was a huge risk on my part. I was just hoping at that point. I didn't even really see it coming. But when it popped up on my screen, I was ecstatic. And then you put them in that Coral Gables regional, and I've been calling Miami kind of a fraudulent team all year long. I don't trust what they've been doing. The ACC is a very good league, and they've been kind of at the top of that league, but there's still something about that Miami team that doesn't quite scream championship pedigree to me. I think Ole Miss could easily come out of that Coral Gables regional. And I'll tell you, when I made that tweet several weeks ago, and I said Ole Miss is going to be playing in a super regional, I'm really excited to have the opportunity to go back and read through those replies if I'm right.
Jake, come on in. Let's get your take on that, and obviously ask some questions. I know you'll probably talk a little Tennessee baseball. We'll go from there.
Yeah, firstly, I think to kind of piggyback off what Noah said, I don't know that I was necessarily surprised to see Ole Miss get in, but I don't know. It just the way that they finished out the year. Obviously, Hoover doesn't count for everything, but I was just disappointed to see that they went one and done. Obviously against a Vandy team that can be good at times, but Noah, what did you think of the fact that Ole Miss literally did not get a single win at the SEC tournament? I mean, I feel like they kind of deserve to be in the NCAAs, but I don't know, it seemed like it was a very lackluster end to their season as compared to the rest of it. And kind of like you said, they, got manhandled there at the end. So what do you think put them over the top?
Headed into Hoover, I thought that they were in. I thought that if they win a game, you're for sure in. You don't even have to sweat it out on Selection Monday. But I think they're in regardless. But then the SEC tournament and tournament week just goes on so long, and you see all these teams steal bids. And even a team like Kentucky, who we kind of forgot about during the regular season, make a case for themselves in Hoover. And you start to think, well, Ole Miss, it's been a long time since we've even seen them play. Are we even going to notice if they aren't in the NCAA tournament field? So just kind of almost an extreme recency bias when it comes to that conference tournament time where you forget about these teams who maybe deserve to be in. Or AA's committee, you overlook some teams that, are right on that bubble just because they lose so early or other circumstances like in NC State's case.
Right. And I think that NC State case is one that I wanted to ask about as well, because Mitch and I both noted it, but obviously with everything going the way it did last year for NC State, what was your reaction to them not getting in this year? And I feel like seemingly deservingly so.
When I was watching the bracket come out on the selection show, I was kind of checking off the bubble teams. I was really ecstatic when Ole Miss got in, but I was waiting for Alabama, looking at Grand Canyon, Dallas Baptist, those kind of teams that all the projections had right on that bubble. And it didn't even occur to me that they didn't say NC State. It was just one of those things where, yep, look at all these bubble teams got in. Here's who got left out. And then I think I was scrolling Twitter and somebody in my mention said, no NC State ? And it hit me like a ton of bricks that NC State did not get in the NCAA tournament. It was one of those things that was a given in my mind. They weren't even close to the bubble. I look at it now and I do understand it a little bit more, but I think NC State has a legitimate gripe with the NCAA, of course, with last year. And now you have to wonder, what has NC State done to the NCAA to deserve this kind of treatment 2 years in a row?
Right. So secondly, going off that, you mentioned a couple of those bubble teams, those close games of teams stealing bids this past season. What was the biggest surprise to you, or do you think the greatest move out of all that, I guess, for lack of a better word, movement that we saw this past week?
Yeah, of all the teams, it wasn't a team that necessarily stole a bid. It was a team that did very well for themselves in Florida. They came out of nowhere. It was just a couple of weeks ago where we were talking about Florida maybe being a bubble team, and all of a sudden they were not only a host but a lock to host. One of those where if you said Florida wasn't hosting, you would have been laughed at. There was also that same degree with North Carolina, but they were a little bit hotter coming into Hoover than Florida was. Florida just dialed it up and impressed the committee just enough to get that host spot. You can say what you want about Florida getting maybe a little bit of that national brand bias, but Florida did an excellent job for themselves in Hoover. I don't know if they'll be able to handle that pressure with a very good Oklahoma team who's going to be having a chip on their shoulder, but they earned that host bid in Hoover, and good for them.
Right. And, going off, I think, what I saw of Florida, at least this past week, they even on Championship Sunday, Tennessee got out to a really early lead, and then Florida chipped away at that. Tennessee switched up its pitching and went with a couple different arms, and Florida ended up making it a decent game down the stretch, 8-5. But I was really impressed at the fact that they just frankly continued to battle, even though seemingly the number one seed had already kind of run away with it, and they made it closer than I think Tennessee would have liked it to be in those final couple innings for the SEC title.
Yeah, this is one of those years where the SEC tournament is sometimes a couple teams are prone to take it off because they kind of locked in a spot. You expected that from Tennessee, but we didn't get it from Tennessee. Pretty much everybody else, maybe except for A&M, was really playing for something in their postseason hopes, and Florida took advantage of it. And I think they benefited from the committee knows that these teams are also playing for something, as opposed to maybe a normal year where Florida beats a few teams where it really doesn't mean a whole lot. This year it meant a whole lot more.
So obviously I cover Tennessee primarily. So, one of my first questions has got to be about that. So everyone's talking about the fact that, right now it really is Tennessee versus the field. So point blank, Tennessee versus the field for the national championship. What do you think?
Well, if you just look at it, it's really, really hard to beat Tennessee. Really, really hard to do it twice. Somebody's probably going to have to do it twice. If it's not somebody, two teams are going to have to gang up and do it. And it's really hard to see that. But then you have that stat that no one seed has won since, I believe it's 1999, maybe even earlier than that. And it's really, really hard to bet against that. And we have this almost precedent set with Arkansas, where the parallels between Arkansas and Tennessee are kind of jumping off the page. Arkansas even performed better in the SEC. And it's really, really hard to say, yeah, Tennessee is going to win, but it's also impossible to say that I can trust any team to beat them. So I have my eyes on Stanford myself, but I'm not willing to bet on anybody other than Tennessee to win the national championship at this point. They are just a machine. And so we can talk about them being one of the greatest teams of all time. And if they win that national championship, they're a lot better than some of the teams that haven't in recent history. I'll tell you that.
Okay. So to piggyback kind of what off Jake said, I do apologize. I had to step away for a second. I'm at my grandparents. I had to find somewhere to plug in the laptop. It was like dying. So I was outside sitting. I was like, oh crap. So anyway, to kind of, I want to ask you about a team like Texas A&M. Do you think Texas A&M has those pieces to win a national championship? Obviously, for me, and Jake can probably attest, I picked A&M to win the SEC tournament. They got close. I picked A&M to make it to Omaha, and now I'm sitting here going, okay, I think A&M has the pieces to win it, but again, who can actually beat Tennessee?
I don't know who can beat Tennessee. It's going to be quite the job, but when I look at Texas A&M, I see a very good team. They hit the ball well. They pitch way better than anybody could have projected. If they get everybody going, if they get Micah Dallas going, that's going to be kind of the catalyst for a national championship run that the Aggies have. But in the back of my mind, I see Aggie teams of the past where they get to Omaha and then they kind of disappear. They're like a ghost in Omaha. And that is worrisome. You try not to put the history of a program on one individual team, but it's really hard to overlook that when you look at those kind of teams like A&M who kind of just fade when the bright lights turn on. But I think they have a good draw. I think they have a pretty favorable draw to get to Omaha. I worry about TCU. God knows the committee loves to pair up A&M and TCU in the postseason. They did it again. But I think A&M has a really, really fair chance at winning, at least winning their regional, winning a super regional, getting to Omaha. Then after that, of course, anybody can get hot at the right time. But yeah, I really like A&M. I worry about how they field the ball, which LSU has those same characteristics. But yeah, I like the Aggies a lot.
So to follow up on that, obviously, I've seen LSU play in person this year. I've seen Southern Miss play in person this year. The Hattiesburg Regional is probably one of the most interesting regionals on paper to myself. I don't know about the rest of college baseball, but that Hattiesburg Regional is a very tough regional. Who do you see coming out of that? Can LSU defeat the Golden Eagles to get out of Hattiesburg?
Well, it seems like every time LSU gets on a slump at the right time, they fall right into a 2 seed. You can argue they shouldn't have been, but they're in a 2 seed in kind of a regional where their fans can travel. Last year, they had them all the way up in Oregon, and the fans still showed out. So you can never count out LSU fans into turning into their home game as much as you can. But Southern Miss will have an absolute party at that place. They kind of remind me of East Carolina. They're finally breaking through and getting those big games that you want on your campus. It's going to be really hard to beat Southern Miss. They're a good team. They have 3 outstanding starting pitchers, which is exactly what you want in the postseason. It's going to be hard for me to bet against Southern Miss, but at the same time, I look at LSU, a team that was ranked number 1 at some point during the season, has excellent players. Jacob Berry's a first-round pick. Dylan Cruz might go number 1 overall next year. Again, they struggle defensively, but when you talk about some of the most talented teams in this tournament, there aren't many better than LSU. So you have to weigh the crowd, the big moment, 3 excellent starting pitchers versus kind of that huge offense, those big gaudy numbers that LSU brings. How many fans can they get in that building? I saw it was the first regional to completely sell out. So great for the fans in Hattiesburg. Should be a great one. If I had to pick one, I would go with Southern Miss simply because it's in Hattiesburg.
Looking at another region, then I'm going to turn it back over to Jake, but Vanderbilt traveling to Oregon State. Another interesting regional because it looks like every time it looks like Vanderbilt's making a run, every time it looks like Vanderbilt of old of last year and the years prior, then they take 3 steps back. Can Vanderbilt do it again and get out of that Corvallis region, or is Oregon State just that freaking good?
Well, just like we've been saying with LSU, Vanderbilt absolutely has the talent. We've kind of been looking at Vanderbilt all year and saying this doesn't really feel like a championship level Vanderbilt team, but even a down Vanderbilt team is better than a whole lot of teams' best seasons. So when you look at a team like Vanderbilt going up to Corvallis, it's going to be tough for them. Will the Whistler follow? We certainly hope not, but it'll be one of those series where we have the SEC talent versus kind of the way that Oregon State has always been is they have great talent up in the Pacific Northwest, but definitely not on that level of where Vanderbilt can go into a living room and get a kid that Oregon State can't. So there's going to be an exciting opportunity for those boys in Corvallis to get up and play the SEC teams like they've done previously in the postseason against LSU in Goss Stadium and against Vanderbilt several years ago in Goss Stadium. So it's going to be a great one. I'm leaning towards Oregon State. But at the same time, if Vanderbilt gets that talent clicking against an Oregon State team that's kind of been slumping the last couple of weeks, you could be cooking with oil with a great Commodores team. We kind of been thinking Tim Corbin is gearing up for the postseason all year long, just because his strategies have kind of been a little bit unique this year. So you never know with Vanderbilt. Give me Oregon State, but I'm very, very cautious. If Vanderbilt can get hot, they'll be in Omaha.
I like the take. Jake, come back on in here. I know you've got a couple questions. And by the way, I don't know if you saw it, but we were in Hoover and everything. We heard the Vandy Whistler get drowned out by the Tennessee fans. It was awesome. It was actually pretty funny. And then we saw Mincy. You could literally see it from the press box. Jake wasn't there yet. See it from the press box. Mincy came down there and literally said, "Hey, you're a disgrace to college baseball." But Jake, come on in here, talk a little college baseball, then we'll wrap up here in the next 10 minutes or so.
Yeah. So, I had a couple questions about another regional that is, I think, more intriguing to me than it is some other people. So looking at the Statesboro regional with Georgia Southern, just give me your thoughts on that. And at this point, I mean, do you feel like the Eagles are a lock to make it out of that? Because I feel like Notre Dame and Texas Tech can both be sneaky there.
This regional was absolutely loaded, and I think for good reason, because I don't think Georgia Southern should have been a host. I think Notre Dame should have been safely in that hosting conversation. I think this maybe should have been Oklahoma's regional, if anything. Well, then you look at even a 3 seed like Texas Tech is coming there. I don't think they should have been on the 3 line. I think they fell a little bit. It doesn't really matter when you're a 2 versus a 3, but it might give them a little bit of an edge that we kind of forgot about Texas Tech, but they were nearly winning the Big 12 regular season. And then Notre Dame is going to have a monstrous chip on their shoulder because they just got robbed of a regional host and arguably a super regional host. I think they could have been on that 8 line and we wouldn't have been too overwhelmingly surprised. But I think Georgia Southern might have that little bit of an edge themselves. They're playing in a home regional for the first time, I presume, ever. And they're getting Notre Dame in there and everybody's picking Notre Dame. So look out. It's going to be a really fun one. I do think people are overlooking it, but it is stacked. It's one of the deepest regionals we have this year. And Georgia Southern's a great team. People are overlooking them a little bit just because of their name, but they've been hanging around that middle of the rankings all year long. I think Texas State is where they've been in the rankings all year.
Yep.
So it could be a great one.
Awesome. And the only other one that I wanted to ask about, obviously here in Knoxville with the Knoxville Regional, obviously you've got Tennessee, Campbell, and then Alabama State. And wow, I just completely went blank there for a second. Tennessee, Campbell, Alabama State. And can somebody fill me in here because I just completely went brain dead?
It's Georgia Tech.
Georgia Tech, yeah. With Zach Parada, yeah. But going off that, actually, I just that reminds me, but the power in this regional, you've got 2 teams in top 10 in home runs in Campbell and Georgia Tech. Obviously, Tennessee has the answers at on the mound, but I feel like that's the biggest question going into this is, can anyone match Tennessee in pitching, and how does everybody else hold up? And if we're being honest, what is a pretty small park in Lindsey Nelson? How does Tennessee handle other teams possibly being able to adjust to that as well?
Well, I don't think Tennessee is going to have too big of a problem here. I thought this region might be a little bit heavy from what you might expect from a number 1 overall seed with players like Kevin Prada and Zach Neto. And you look at that Campbell team and people know what they're all about. Campbell's probably been the number 1 fan favorite mid-major for 2 or 3 years now.
Right.
And that's a veteran group. They've been in the postseason. They won a game in the Struckville Regional last year. That's going to be a pretty dangerous group. I'm surprised the committee didn't give them a little bit of a better draw as that 3 seed. And then the 2 seed with Georgia Tech, Kevin Prada is one of the best players in the country. He's a first-round pick. So you have all kinds of talent. Georgia Tech is a very inconsistent team, kind of like a lot of the ACC is. I don't think Tennessee is going to lose a game in this regional, but there are going to be a lot of maybe 8-7 finals in this regional.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing I'm going to have to worry about is finding a spot behind the plate to take pictures because there are going to be so many scouts there. There's going to be 9 possible top MLB picks in this regional, so it's going to be stacked as far as talent's concerned.
Yeah, that's going to be insane. You talk about the SEC being as heavy as it gets, and you found these other 2 teams with loaded rosters themselves. It's going to be a great one.
All right, Mitch, I'll turn it back over to you.
Last question I have for and then we'll close it for the night. Back against the wall, give me your national champion.
Well, I almost previewed it earlier. I think Tennessee is the best team in the country. They are maybe the deepest roster in the country. We talked about Texas earlier in the year, but they have lost some talent. They've kind of fallen off. When I look at the path, I like Stanford to win the national championship. I don't want to pick the favorite with Tennessee. I love this Stanford team. They've won 16 games in a row now, which I would like to see them lose a game so you don't have to win, 28 in a row to win a national championship. But Stanford looks like a national championship pedigree team. We kind of forgot about them for a little while. I like them a lot.
Noah, drop all your social media and where they can find all of your excellent work. Of course, Jake and I will wrap up the show later on tonight.
Well, we got a great crew of people, so I'll tweet out all the writers later if you guys want to check that out. But follow at 247 CWS. We also do a Saturday morning show every week where we break down college baseball in the week. We'll be doing it a lot during the NCAA tournament, and that's at the WKND Rotation on Twitter. That's the weekend rotation. Great show. Thanks for having me, guys.
Thanks, Noah. We'll talk closer to the College World Series after this weekend's craziness.
Absolutely. Let's do it.
Let's go. This is, Jake, how would you put this? This is part 2 of the Hit It to Hoover podcast on Wednesday, June 1st, Thursday, June 2nd. We're 1 day away from the NCAA tournament, but we're going to recap the SEC tournament. on the baseball diamond, what are your takeaways from the SEC tournament?
Well, my first takeaway is that Tennessee went through it like we expected them to.
Yeah.
Ended up winning the whole thing, obviously, with an 8-5 victory over Florida on Sunday. Flexed their muscles in, I think, every way possible. You saw the hitting power from guys like Blake Burke, which, speaking of which, what a moonshot against Kentucky, my gosh. You saw the offensive explosions, and I'm sorry, Mitch, also against Kentucky. You saw the pitching as well. Tennessee rotating through not too many arms, not having to go through that much pitching, not using, I don't think, everything up, and saving plenty back, and with rest to go for this weekend at regionals. And you saw a lot of impressive pitching. Obviously, Blade Tidwell did well, but Chase Dolander, man, he threw a gem against LSU and was named to the all-tournament team for it. You saw guys like Drew Gilbert show out. He was named the tournament MVP, had a couple fantastic plays defensively, and then was successful at the plate as well. So you saw Tennessee do everything that everyone expected them to, and now they are roaring into the postseason. Another big takeaway, I thought Kentucky played some great baseball. I thought they earned themselves an NCAA tournament bid, and it did not happen. But I thought the Wildcats scrapped and clawed, no pun intended, with the best of them, and they played some fantastic baseball, did great. Was really impressed with the performance that they turned in, literally with their backs against the wall, needing to turn something in to try to get a bid to the regionals. And then Alabama really stood out to me as well, played really well. And another big takeaway, how about the Florida Gators? Played their way into the championship on Sunday against Tennessee, and even after the balls jumped out to a lead, kept battling, ended up coming back and making it an 8-5 game after it had been 7-1, 7-2 for the majority of it. So kudos to Florida for playing some great ball down the stretch, and they could make some noise here in the regionals as well. So those are my big takeaways. I guess lastly, can't forget this one, the 2021 SEC tournament champs, the Arkansas Razorbacks, going 0-2 in Hoover. So you can't forget about that one. Dave Van Horn's team going into the regionals with a lot of questions right now, pitching concerns with Connor Noland, maybe some morale concerns with guys like Michael Turner with that interview that he gave. So, a lot of questions surrounding the Hogs right now as well.
Jake, before we even talk about with the Diamond, I think I pissed off the Arkansas fan base. And like you can definitely sense that there is something wrong in that Arkansas locker room. Do you think Arkansas can turn it around whatsoever?
At this point, I'm not sure. It seems like you're right there. It seems like there is something just off about that team. And it's more than just that they haven't put the pieces together this year, which is true, because you've got guys like, Robert Moore that have been good at the plate, but like I said, just haven't been able to put it all together offensively or defensively, like I said, with the pitching concerns. But I think it's a little more than that now. I think you're looking a little deeper to try to see if there's, any DNA issues within that locker room, like you said, because it seems like there's something a little off about the guys that won it all last year in Hoover and who did really well in the postseason as well.
One of the biggest takeaways for me, obviously, you mentioned it, and we're going to focus on the positives, but you have to give me like 3 minutes to just blast the committee. Like am I allotted the 3 minutes to blast the committee tonight?
You're allotted as much time as you want. Go ahead, because I want to hear this.
I'm just going to go ahead. I'm a man that's very brash. I'm just going to go ahead and rightfully say it. It is bullshit. Absolute bullshit that Alabama and Kentucky are not in that NCAA tournament. I get that Ole Miss had whatever, they were number one in this team in the country 1 point, that lost to Tennessee, whatever. I get that. I get Ole Miss has the talent. But when you look at the SEC tournament, Jake, you cannot tell me that there are, I don't know, 4 other better teams in the SEC that got in the NCAA tournament that are better than Alabama and Kentucky. Okay? You just can't do it. I mean, what else does the team have to do? I get it. Kentucky's had some bad losses, But what else does a Kentucky team have to do? They made it to the semifinals of the SEC tournament, winning 5 out of the 6 games, winning 5 games. And 2 of those were elimination games. They beat Tennessee in the regular season. They beat TCU in the regular season, beat Auburn in the regular season. They took the series against Georgia. And they, by the way, they had 14 top 25 wins, whether that be counted in the SEC tournament, whether it be counted, whatever. I don't get it. Out of the 2 between Kentucky and Alabama, Kentucky scrapped. They just ran out of pitching. And you're going to tell me because they didn't win the SEC tournament that they didn't deserve the NCAA tournament? Come on now. You can't, I feel the same way about NC State. NC State, when you compare the RPI and you compare their strength of schedule to Ole Miss, NC State is better, on all categories. And they played for a conference championship. They got beat by a red-hot North Carolina team. But back to Kentucky and Alabama, I don't get it. I don't understand what the committee is looking at because it's supposed to be, I get the RPI, you want to throw the RPI, whatever. But it's supposed to be about the best teams getting in the tournament at that given time. And Ole Miss lost to Vanderbilt. They were one and done. They got dominated by Vanderbilt. They couldn't get the hits. They couldn't get any of they gave up, 5-6 runs to Vanderbilt? And you're going to leave out Kentucky? You're going to leave out Alabama? Jake, help me make sense of this because I don't get it. I don't understand. And that's the end of my rant right there. That's it.
All right. So they're going more off what Ole Miss did in the regular season. But I mean, quite honestly, I don't fully understand this one either. I mean, look, the fact that, I get that, you don't pay all attention to the SEC tournament, but outside of Tennessee winning the thing, it's like nobody paid any attention to the SEC tournament because you have an Ole Miss team that lost its play-in game against Vanderbilt and was done. And they ended up the last team to get into the 64-team field for the NCAA regionals. And yet, like you said, teams that played their way into the semifinals, Alabama played great baseball, they didn't get in. So a lot of questions to be had for sure, like you said, for Alabama and Kentucky, but also teams like NC State, which got robbed now twice in a row.
Second year in a row. Like last year, what was it? And I'm not going to get in the COVID argument or whatever you wanted, whatever. But literally the argument was an equipment manager tested positive, have not been around the team, but yet they had a forfeit. If I was an NC State fan, I'd be heading to Indianapolis with pitchforks and a lighter and just burning the NCAA down to the ground. Metaphorically, burning the place down to the ground, starting it over and starting some kind of NC State, against the world type thing, because NC State deserved the NCAA tournament. But Jake, more action on the field before I get to talk. I want to talk about my LSU fans. I love those LSU fans. We're going to talk about that. Out of the teams you saw this weekend, other than Tennessee, who do you see that can make a deep run to Omaha?
Of the teams that I saw this weekend, the other teams, I would say, I don't know. I feel like Auburn maybe would be my other pick right now.
I like that.
And you know what? Actually, no, I take it back. I would go LSU. I really like what I saw in that game between Tennessee and LSU, because if anybody can put it up against Tennessee, and let's be honest, we've said before, it's Tennessee versus the field. If anybody can pose a threat to Tennessee in the NCAAs, I think it is the Tigers, and I think especially with what I saw from their fan base, man, that environment was legit. And Dylan Cruz is the real deal. And so long as they can have their pitching together, I think LSU is a really good threat to make a deep run.
So before we talk about a little bit more regional, since you mentioned the LSU fans, it's the perfect segue for LSU fans, and we now have a large LSU following thanks to me literally going out there with bourbon and was hey, what's up? It was, what I'm saying?
Yeah, for those who don't know, so I was So I cover Tennessee primarily. So I was in the press box, rotating around the field, watching the Tennessee Vanderbilt game whenever they played on Thursday night. Yeah, Thursday night after it had been postponed from Wednesday. So I'm walking around, taking pictures, just doing my thing, tweeting about Tennessee stuff. Come back up in the press box, and about three and a half innings in, here comes Mitch barreling back into the press box, looking like he's just come off of Christmas morning with Santa Claus. And I said, "Hey man, what's up?" And he just starts telling me all about the jambalaya he just ate, all about the free beer he just drank, and about the fantastic time that he had down at the RV park with the LSU fans. So Mitch, you may proceed. Sorry about that.
Okay, that's pretty fair. So I don't think I told you, and I don't know, like I have to go back and find the tweet, but somebody like either direct messaged me or sent me a tweet and was like, "Hey, come out to the RV park." Like, so I was like, okay, screw it. Like, I've been to Hoover once, saw one game, whatever. So I was like, all right, I'm gonna go to the RV park. So go out to the RV park, and everybody knows I'm a Kentucky fan. I had my blue and white, my UK hat on. We were about to play that night. Like, we were gonna play LSU the first time. So I'm walking around RV park, UK hat on, grinning from ear to ear. I'm like, oh my God, the smells beautiful. Like, it's amazing. So the first tailgate I come upon, I forgot where they were from. I think it was Hammond, Louisiana. Came upon them. We started talking. They were like, "Hey, do you want some beer?" I was like, well, "Yeah, like I love Busch Light. I love Miller Lite. Like, absolutely, hell yeah, let's go." So gave me some beer. I won't disclose how many beers that I had there, and then proceeded to tell me like,
copious
"Hey,
amounts."
Do what?
Copious amounts.
There it was glorious. So then proceeded to tell me, "Hey, like here's this where we are. You go around the corner, like you know how like Southerners, we always say like our directions, like all around the corner, like go over this hill, whatever." They told me, yeah. So I was like, okay. So I found the tailgate. So I'm walking up, everything, got my UK hat on, and this LSU fan, I forgot his name, literally was like, "Go Tigers!" I was like, "Hey, like go Wildcats," whatever. So come to find out, like this was the place. This is right across the street from Cruz's parents, and they were like, it was like a masterpiece. And they had just got done with some jambalaya. They had some fried fish, some other things, wonderful. And they were like, we literally, Jared Redding and I, like, and he's a normal guest on the podcast, covers Ole Miss. We went out there and I just made friends. Like I was like, I was like a kid on like, it was literally like somebody giving like drugs for the first time. It was awesome. I don't know if I can say that, but whatever. So like, this is going completely off the rocker. Here we go. Like, this is it. So I'm enjoying the amounts of beer and the White Claws and everything else that I was inhaling. Like I'm inhaling at this point. And the big old dude, I want to say his name was like, so anyway, I want to say it was, I don't want to butcher it, so I'm not going to like be quoted on that, but it's something Cajun. So the dude was like, "Hey, like, do you want to take a picture with it?" I was like, "Hell yeah, let's go. Like, let's do it." So he gives me the oar and was like, "This is how you hold it. Take a picture for your family back home." And I was like, "Oh my God." Like, okay. So we took the picture and like I became a hit. Like it was like, here's this Kentucky kid, he's not used to this. He loves the Saints, but like he's not from Louisiana. So these people, I had the moms, I had the babies, I had the brothers, I had everybody coming out of the RVs, coming and welcoming me. And they're like, one of the guys, I think his name is Sutton. They actually did like a big article about him and his dad. They're like the tailgate host of it. Sutton's a 16-year-old kid. So he's like coming out and he's like, "Hey man, like here's my phone number, follow you on Instagram, whatever." So I was like, okay. So come to find out, they have been tailgating there for, I don't know, 15, 20 years. I have to go look at the Baton Rouge Advocate. They did a great article there. So anyway, so long story short, there's a family right next to them that is Mississippi State friends. They like Mississippi State fans. Are from Mississippi. They just come to Hoover every year. So they literally invite every fan base in the entire SEC, no matter who you are, even if you're a Tennessee fan or even if you're an Alabama fan, whatever. They're inviting you to this. And like, this is what heaven looked like. That is what I experienced. Like, and the funny thing is, Jake, my fiance Reagan was texting me the whole time going, "Are you really in the RV lot? Are you really doing this?" And like Jared's like texting her, Snapchatting her. He's like, "Dude, Mitch is having the time of his life." Like, and I think I got back to the press box and you were like, "What'd you do?" And like, we told you, and it was just I still can't stop talking about it. I'm literally smiling talking about the hospitality of the LSU fans. And I asked them, I was like, why do you guys get such a bad rep? They're like, because when we play you and we play you in Death Valley, we want to beat the hell out of you. He's like, but we're going to feed you and butter you up. And that way you leave happy. So I was like, that's pretty fair. So yeah, so that's my experience in the RV lot at the Hoover Met.
I have not been regaled with the full story until now, but I am glad to have been so.
That was it was fun, dude. It was. And then I come back the next morning. I think they were all hungover because Kentucky LSU didn't end until 2 a.m.
Right.
And I delivered Kentucky bourbon and L8. And so to my LSU friends, I hope you enjoyed because y'all showed me a damn good time. I really, really might have turned into a low-key LSU baseball fan now.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, no Tigers, baby. They were so nice. Truly, truly nice. But other than the RV lot, what is your overall takeaway from Hoover? What do you think about the Hoover Met?
I think that they do a phenomenal job with it every year, and that the SEC tournament, aside from the College World Series, the SEC tournament is the best college tournament or the best tournament in college baseball, hands down, outside of Omaha.
Would you say it is one of the most magical places in sports?
I think on a good day, yes.
Okay. That's pretty fair. I think you and I, because we walked around, Jared and I walked around, we saw, 13 out of the 14 SEC schools represented, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, everybody in Missouri. Because we even saw, that's the cool thing. Hoover even brings in fan bases that are not there in Hoover. How many Mississippi State fans did you see this weekend?
At least 10.
Yeah, I saw a good bit. Especially for them not playing. And I asked a couple of them, they're like, yeah, man, this is a vacation for us. But you've been to Omaha, you've been to Hoover. How do they compare?
So a good night in Hoover between two premier teams is as good as any night in Omaha. But an elite night in Omaha is otherworldly. That Vanderbilt Stanford game last year, whenever Vanderbilt won on, what was it, a walk-off?
Yeah,
I can't remember exactly.
Walk-off wild pitch or something
that.
That.
Yeah, but nights like that, they are otherworldly. But on a good night in Hoover, it is comparable to, I think, the first few days of Omaha. I don't think it's comparable to the latter half whenever it's really crunch time. But I think that the week in Hoover is comparable to part of Omaha. But the cool part of Omaha is, I will say, Mitch, I did disagree with one point that you made in that article about Hoover. It's great, but Hoover, because it's, close to Birmingham, Hoover does it right. They've got, the restaurants around there. They've got everything you need right there for the fans. And the stadium itself, to their credit, they roll out the red carpet because the Hoover Met, they do a phenomenal job. They feed you fantastically. You can go wherever you need to. They're easygoing, really, really chill about everything, and provide great media access, great, fan stuff everywhere. The fan favorite, it's all great. But I will say that nothing I have ever seen in sports rolls out the red carpet like Omaha, Nebraska for the College World Series, especially. And you kind of have to take this with, the fact that it was my first time there. But when you consider the fact that last year was the first College World Series after a pandemic, that takes it up even more, because Omaha missed the World Series so much the year prior, because you think about their economy, how much it impacts it, with so many fans not coming to town, with so many fans not buying hotels, not visiting restaurants, not just being there for 2 weeks. And all of a sudden it floods back in, and they have the reason they exist in the summer all over again. It is unlike anything I've ever seen.
So two more things because we got like the 8-minute thing that's like flashing up. I don't know. Do you want to do another late night here talking baseball? Because we could literally talk for nights. But let me ask you this, because a lot of people pose it on Twitter. Do you think the SEC tournament should stay in Hoover?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Like, I think people that say no have never experienced Hoover because, like you said, that place is magical. Like, I haven't been to Omaha, and I think that should be mine and yours, like, probably after next April, after I get married. That should be our next, like, guys trip, is to go out to Omaha, because I think that would be, I don't even have the words. Like, that's my next bucket list. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's my next thing. So, final question I have for you, Jake. Out of the SEC teams that are in the NCAA tournament, who is your sleeper to get to Omaha? I'm going to put you on the spot there.
I can't decide between LSU and A&M. You decide for me.
LSU. At LSU. I don't think A&M would be so much a sleeper because everybody, I wouldn't say they expect it, but they're good. Like, A&M is good. I would say LSU. Now, my surprise pick of the tournament, and we talked to the guys at college CWS247, check them out. That's the first part of the interview. My super regional matchup that's going to throw a lot of heads this way is Ole Miss versus LSU in a super regional, with LSU
Really
going on to Omaha. Yeah, as much as I want to hate on Ole Miss because they stole the bids from Alabama and Kentucky, at one point this season, Ole Miss was 9-0, heading into the Tennessee series, and like nobody else, they had no idea how to handle Tennessee. Ole Miss has the pieces. When Tim Elko is hot, when Jacob Gonzalez is hot, their pitching is, pitching the way that it should. Ole Miss can beat anybody in the country. Ole Miss, LSU, Super Regionals, going 3 games, LSU goes to the College World Series. Like, that's my prediction right there. And that's what I'm going to stick by.
All right.
I mean, I had Texas A&M winning the SEC tournament, but my bold pick heading into the NCAA tournament, Ole Miss, LSU get out of their regionals this weekend, setting up for a monster weekend next weekend in Baton Rouge, which, by the way, I've talked to Jared and one more person. If Ole Miss gets out of this regional and they either play in Baton Rouge or they play in Hattiesburg, the Hit It to Hoover part of our staff, because you'll be in Knoxville, half of our staff will be there, and the other half of us, you, will be in Knoxville. So let's go. Let's do it. Like, let's have a good week. But Jake, drop your socials, man, and we're going to crank out this podcast probably sometime tomorrow.
Yeah, follow me at jnichols_2121 on Twitter and Insta.
All right, Jake.